This is the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast with Greg Smith and Jay Foreman. Tell it to me straight up.
Hello, and welcome to the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast, proudly part of the Hail Varsity Network, which also has Mind Your Own Podcast, Varsity Club Podcast, more to it, and the Hail Varsity Radio Show. I am Greg Smith, your oatmeal cream pie loving Peloton riding friend.
I am Jay Foreman, your steak eating, crab meat eating, and grilling connoisseur here with Greg.
That does sound delicious. Right,
yeah,
I'm hitting you off the top with crabs and steak.
Blue crabs, man.
I haven't had lunch. We out there. Okay. Now, before we get into kind of what this podcast is and kind of how it came to be, my day is crazy. Already. I had to come in here and ask Sasha, who is so graciously producing for us today, like, hey, do you smell gas? And I think she thought I was crazy. When I said it, I ran out of gas on the way in here. Mm-hmm. And I ended up on kind of the side of the road by a bank, but I was luckily close to a gas station, had to walk over there. Of course, they had no gas cans. I had to fill up two 44-ounce cups with gas, walk over to the car, then realize, oh, yeah, it's not the same as when you put a nozzle into the gas to do that. So I'm just pouring gas all over the place. So my day is interesting. So
you had a good, quite the adventure. Well, I'll say this: you don't smell like gas, and since you smell good, that might be a new type of cologne that you could come out with, or something. If you have a little bit of gas on you, but it's funny when you have those type of days. They always talk about the walk of shame. Mm-hmm. That is kind of like your business walk of shame. Run down the gas. Walking in there, asking for a gas can, or obviously in your case, some cups, because it's not only the walk there, it's the walk back, and it seems like it's not that far, but once you start walking it, because not a lot of people don't walk now, it's a lot farther than you think. Yeah,
it was really honestly the walk, and it was not very far at all. Like it was a strip mall worth of stuff that I had to walk. It was a walk back, and it did feel like a walk of shame with gas in my hands. But welcome in again to the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast. So this podcast has been a while in the making. It feels like it's only been probably 4 to 6 weeks since we kind of recorded our own little secret episode to kind of test things out and see how things went. As we've been kind of discussing, Jay and I, about being able to do this podcast, we've wanted to do something like this together for a long time. We're excited to be able to do it and bring it to you guys and bring our take and flavor on what you're seeing and hearing in the world of sports. But a lot has happened in just that little bit of time. I almost wish we could take a whole time. We won't today, but take a whole podcast and just talk about all of the crazy things that have happened. Looking at you, Big Ten, because there's been plenty of stuff out there that's gone on.
Yeah, it's amazing. If you look at sports in general, they say that like a locker room is a microcosm of the world, but sports is the soap opera of the world. There's not a day that goes by that you could Google crazy happenings in any sports. Is going to be something, and it's whether it's in the United States or in Europe. When you think of professional soccer or anything like that, there's tons of goings on an everyday basis. Actually, almost up to the hour that it's really changing. And so, 4 weeks is a lot of time. Obviously, I'm excited to obviously get on here with you and see where it goes.
Yeah, it'll be fun, and that Jay, as a former Husker, can talk about the Huskers. I cover Nebraska football as a recruiting analyst over at Hail Varsity magazine and website, and we will get into that plenty as we now have football back. Nothing has quite happened yet. It feels like since that announcement happened, it just went quiet, right? We've seen a couple of videos and a handful of pictures, but until I think it's Friday when they put the pads on and start hitting, we're going to hear from Frost and some assistants supposedly this week. So we'll have some more stuff probably on all of that next week. But we will talk about the Huskers, obviously, but we will also talk about just general sports and all of the things that are kind of going on in the wild world of sports, because there's just, like you said, there's just so much going on.
Coach, speak to real talk.
Every week we're going to have we're going to come at you every Wednesday, and every week we will have a couple of segments. And the very first one that we're going to have each week is called Coach Speak. It'll be a mainstay of of the show. We'll go over something that a coach, a player, or a talking head has said, and we'll give you the straight up breakdown of what they meant. Now, the first one is near and dear to my heart because it comes courtesy of Chicago Bears, my team, the head coach, Matt Nagy, who said this after benching starting quarterback Mitchell, don't call me Mitch Trubisky, who has just been terrible. Well, he hasn't been terrible. I shouldn't say that. He was terrible mostly, but he was not great yesterday. But he said, I think what we'll do is we'll go back and just kind of enjoy this one right now, talking about the victory that the Bears had at the comeback win over the Falcons, who let another one go. And Nick Foles led them back. And he said, we'll talk through where we're at, and we'll think about the best decision moving forward. Honestly, we're not there right now.
You want to know what he really meant?
That's what I was going. What did he really mean when he said that?
He was, from my experience of having conversations and seeing those conversations up close and personal with different players, he is telling you Mitch or Mitchell, whatever he wants to call himself, is not there. He won't get there, and he had hoped he got there, and he finally just pulled the plug. And really, what it meant is another one. He said he knew it was time to make the move because he had a gut feeling. Mm-hmm. It's not a gut feeling. He had seen that last year, the year before. He saw it all through training camp this year, and that play in particular, that interception that he got pulled on, is like a no-no. He took the snap. He knew where he was going. He stared him down and threw it. That is something that you don't even see in a lot of high school games. And so what a coach is telling you when he's saying these quotes and saying the one that I read off is that he's saying he knew it was time because the improvement on the little basics of playing quarterback is something that he's not able to do right now. Now, will he ever be able to do it? I doubt it. I think that they're trying. He's already moved on. He's trying to find a way to move on from Mitchell Trubisky and not make Ryan Pace, the GM, upset, because that pick is his pick. And so then you could see some discord from the head coach and the GM. So he's trying to do it in the best way possible. Lucky enough, Nick Foles came in there like the savior that he's always been and plays the best backup role of all time, and he led him to a victory in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and it's funny you said something. I think you had something interesting about Ryan Pace and how he's tied to Trubisky in this case, and he is. But at the same time, this is where it kind of pride is something that comes up a lot in sports, comes up a lot in life, right? And this is something where I think the Ryan Pace general manager cannot let pride and ego get in the way. You just have to take victories and good play, how you get it from whoever you get it from that's on your team. You also brought in Nick Foles, right? You signed him. Now, Mitchell Trubisky might have been your quarterback of the future that you thought so much of, that you drafted him over Watson and Mahomes. We will never let him forget that. But it happened, right? And so when you then have to make that adjustment, though, and say, hey, if I'm not going to go down with the ship, because one of the things I guarantee you that Matt Nagy is thinking is, I'm not going to get fired behind Mitchell Trubisky.
Right.
That's not, I don't want to be fired. So why should I not then go ahead and pull the plug? Because it's not just that, okay, we can be okay if we have a different quarterback in there. They can be a contender because of how good that defense is, how dominant Khalil Mack is, and they have other pieces around on that offense too. And the main problem that everybody could see was the quarterback.
Right.
So if I'm Nagy, I just can't have that.
Well, and I'll take it even a step further back with Ryan Pace and I guess Nagy as well. They signed Mike Glennon from Tampa to come in and gave him a ton of money. And they also gave Chase Daniels a ton of money at times. So their ability to evaluate a good quarterback versus if it's a rookie coming out in the draft or a veteran that needs a better situation has not been up to par. Their defenses over the last 4 years has always been in the top 5, maybe top 6 if you look at the average throughout that year. That's Super Bowl type of winning defenses, not just from a yardage standpoint. It's turnovers and the touchdowns. They have all-star players at every single level. And what I mean from the safety, middle linebacker to the defensive line. Obviously, Khalil Mack is probably, if not the best pass rusher on the outside, he's one of them. He's dominant in the run and pass game. And then you throw in all the plethora of other guys they have depth on defense and speed and playmakers. And actually that's made their offense come along a lot faster as far as like Allen Robinson and those guys going up against that defense. And when you have a quarterback like that and Trubisky that is always going to be tied to, Patrick Mahomes, which is he's going to probably end up being in a Hall of Fame player. Deshaun Watson, if he can get a good team around him, will probably end up being on the cusp of all Hall of Fame career. He's going to probably have, out of this world stats. It's just going to come down to wins and losses. Mitchell Trubisky is this day and time, if everything keeps going on this trend, the NFL version of Sam Bowie.
Ooh.
When he was picked before Michael Jordan. And that is something that in a lot of ways isn't fair, because Sam Bowie went to other teams and actually had a
he was actually
serviceable and actually turned his career around. Injuries hurt him. Mm-hmm. Trubisky is his bad play, but he's going to be tied to a Hall of Fame player. And if Patrick Mahomes continues along this path, you get 3 or 4 Super Bowls down the road, projecting, he's going to be one of the best of all time. Everybody's going to wonder why or how or what were you thinking or smoking or doing both at the same time to draft this guy that didn't even get his 5th year option picked up, and he got drafted number 2.
And you traded up.
You traded up to get him. Yeah. And he only played 1 year at North Carolina. Yes, he had good athletic ability, but the tape that Deshaun Watson, even over Patrick Mahomes,
right?
Because Deshaun Watson beat Alabama, took him first of all, he as a young quarterback, he took Alabama to the I call it the 19th hour, right? Mm-hmm. Then he beat him, and then his senior year he was pretty much unstoppable, right? So his tape playing against the best guys in the best competition was out of this world. And then you took the chance on a guy for whatever reason that had, what did North Carolina win? 8 games?
If that
year?
If it was that. Yeah, and it's one of those things too, and I want to also hit on this is if you're on that team, so if you play defense, so if you're on that defense and you see what's happening with Trubisky and you feel like, what is it like, kind of going into games knowing that, hey, we got to be – it always has to be a game. Like, we cannot bring the B or the B plus level game to win. And then on the other end of that, when you have that shot in the arm from Foles coming in, what is that like? And what kind of mentality or kind of boost of morale can that give your team and your defense?
I can speak directly of looking at an offense as from a defensive standpoint and knowing that when we pull up to the stadium, we won't win if we give up more than 17 points. And that was my first 2 years, or actually every single year I was down there in Houston. And we had David Carr. It wasn't all his fault. We had a porous offensive line, porous management as far as acquiring good veterans and drafting guys. None of them worked out except for Andre Johnson, which was a layup. So I know that it creates a lot of animosity. Mm-hmm. Then you also, in some ways, you start to question the coach or whoever's making the decisions, because everybody knows why they're playing. Right. And so it's not a good position to be in, because sooner or later injuries are going to hit your one main part of your team, whether it's all at once or periodically. Then that now you're going to pull up to the stadium without your best unit at full strength, and you're probably most likely going to lose that game. That's not a fun feeling, and it all depends on the quarterback. Now, to your other point of when another quarterback comes in and gives you a shot in the arm, I can only think of when I was a younger player playing in Buffalo, and we had paid Rob Johnson a whole bunch of money, and then they put Doug Flutie in the game, and then he kind of took over. But every time Doug got in the game, he took it. It was just like Nick Foles, and then he ended up being the starter. But I do remember when Rob went in the game, and we went down to Tennessee, there was a feeling that we would have to play even better to win. But when Flutie got in the game, took us back, got us the lead, obviously had the Music City Miracle, a lot of that loss was pointed to Rob Johnson starting that game. It's not fair,
right?
But at the end of the day, we won 10 games with Flutie. Rob Johnson won one, a kind of a scrimmage, because everybody was in the playoffs, us and the Colts, and he got to start the playoff game on the road against Tennessee. Then the shot in the arm came when Doug Flutie came in. So that's where I can kind of give some personal knowledge on it. It's not fun. And when we're talking about this, you're not personally attacking these guys or anything like that. I'm sure Trubisky's a good teammate, good guy, but the funny quote that he had, he's like, it came out of nowhere. Like, where you been?
He did say that. And I don't understand, what do you
where
mean
you
it
been?
came out of nowhere?
Did you not watch the tape that we watched the week before when you guys barely beat Detroit? The only reason that you beat Detroit is because Swift dropped that wide open. He dropped the wide open touchdown pass. You didn't win the game. Detroit lost the game. Mm-hmm. So this isn't just a in the moment, off the cuff type of decision that Nagy made. This is something that's been coming for a long time. If they brought Nick Foles in, or traded for Nick Foles, I think, and brought him in, and you had a competition, the only reason you most likely started is because you were drafted number 2.
You were the drafted player
of that GM. So the GM gave the coach the free reign to pull him when it wasn't, going well. And it hadn't been going well for the first 3 weeks of the season or up to snuff, or where I say, like, here's what I can say, and then we can move on. The separation wasn't big enough for him not to get pulled from a high school or below high school type of throw,
right,
an interception on the road, and they just looked inept. When he talked about we haven't been able to score in the red zone, we weren't scoring points, he wasn't just talking about against Atlanta.
No.
Right? He was talking about week 2 and week 1. And so it's something that probably Nick Foles probably should have started from the very get-go, but it kind of all worked itself out, and we'll see how it goes. If I had to give Trubisky some advice, I wouldn't worry about it because they always recycle quarterbacks around the league.
Yeah, you can get
Blake Bortles just got picked up.
Yeah, you can.
I saw
his
Blaine
career
Gabbert.
is not over. No.
Blaine Gabbert, I saw him on TV sitting next to Tom Brady having the best seat in the house. Not only that, but Nick Foles is injury prone.
That too.
And so he's very brittle. And so, once you get back in there, and if you take this time the right way and learn from your mistakes and really learn from your mistakes and come out on the better end, everybody's always going to remember how you ended versus how you started. Because it's going to be a kind of a story like, oh, look how bad you started the season, got pulled, and then you ended up, you could sneak in there as a wild card with this Bears team. So, they're 3-0. And I'm sure Nagy knows that this is the time to really try to feast on the NFC Central. He probably feels real confident with that defense against the Packers. Detroit's not very good. The Vikings are horrible. If there's ever a time to kind of, backdoor your way into NFC Central championship and then possibly, get a home field advantage, which evens that playing field in Chicago, regardless if there's fans or not.
Right.
That wind coming off, that hawk coming off of Lake Michigan is the ultimate equalizer. So I'm sure he's thinking not only short term but long term.
Yeah. Now, guys, as we transition away from that,
let's break that down.
We were talking about kind of Trubisky still writing his story, a guy whose story has been well written, well covered, and documented. It's towards the end now. We got to talk about my man, LeBron James. So he went, let me read you this. He went 38 points, 16 rebounds, 10 assists, triple-double to close out the Nuggets 4-1. He told them before the game that he was going to end it, and he ended it. He's at this point, and we're not even going to argue about this, he's at worst, the second greatest basketball player to ever touch a ball. But again, that's not what I want to talk about. We're not going to debate that today.
Right.
What I always think about and have been thinking about here over the last couple of days with LeBron, and we want to get into this, is has there ever been, or who are some of the other athletes that we can think of that came in with as much hype as LeBron did? Remember, he was on with the cover of Sports Illustrated as a senior or junior in high school, because it was a junior in high school where his game started becoming on TV. I remember seeing that.
Senior year.
So I think it was his senior year with the SI cover. As hyped as any athlete we've seen has basically come up through the social media age, which also gives him a little bit of a different vantage point too. But are there any other athletes that come to mind to you, for you, that really did or are doing what LeBron James did? Because he has lived up to all the hype and then some.
Only people I can really think of, and this is, a couple different sports, would be like Wayne Gretzky, just coming up and being the next player was supposed to be better than Gordie Howe, end up being better than Gordie Howe. I would probably tinker around, maybe say Sidney Crosby, but I doubt it. I don't really think that he's I know he's reached his potential, but I don't think he's kind of exceeded the hype. I think LeBron has exceeded the hype. The next would maybe be Shaquille, to be honest with you. It's just because, he was like a folk hero. He was 7 foot. He could run. He could do all the stuff. He was kind of like remember that LSU against Duke, he was running the point. He was doing all that type of stuff. And then he went to the NBA and was destroying fools.
Yeah.
And then he obviously ended up winning championships. I would probably say maybe Shaquille. Football-wise,
Can I give you one football-wise that
Yeah.
I thought of right off the top, and it was the very first one I thought? Peyton Manning.
No, here's why.
Okay.
No, because he couldn't win the big game. But I'm going to give you a better football-wise, though, football guy, Randy Moss. And here's why. He was from West Virginia, and he was thinking I'm going to tell you what really makes LeBron and Randy Moss and these guys is because they're not in big cities. They're off like in the beaten path. You never think the best basketball player is going to come from Akron, Ohio. You think he's going to come from Chicago, New York, or somewhere, LA or somewhere, right?
Great players now, yeah.
Randy Moss is from Rand, West Virginia, off the beaten path. And you just always heard about him. You heard about Randy Moss. He's 6'4", runs a 4.2 40. He went to Florida State. He went to Notre Dame, ended up at Marshall. And then you finally saw him seeing on TV. And then you're like, oh, well, will he be able to do that against good competition? Then he drops in the draft, right? Yep. And then what did he say? I'm going to come in and rip up the league. And what did he proceed to do he ripped up the league.
From his rookie year.
Year, in every big game, you know, he had the 3 catches for like 123 against Dallas on Thanksgiving for 3 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. I mean, he reset what a wide receiver is, what it means to be a receiver, and what you're expected to do from the day one that you come into the league. It wasn't, I mean, Jerry Rice, I think, is the best receiver of all time, kind of like Jordan they're looking at it because Jerry Rice won all the championships, X, Y, and Z. But you got to think, his first couple years of Jerry Rice, he had a lot of drops and everything. Randy Moss just came right in and was doing work. And then he did it 2 or 3 different places. So I would probably say football-wise, Randy Moss. Not to say Peyton Manning didn't, but I think it took Peyton Manning so long.
Maybe that's what it is. And I was, as you were saying, when you said no right away to Peyton and he couldn't win the big one, maybe that is because LeBron from the beginning it was a few years before he went to that first finals.
Right.
Peyton also struggled a little bit more out of the gate as well. All those interceptions early on, people were wondering if he would get over that. That was not necessarily the case with LeBron. And I saw some interesting stuff at some point last year that was saying, you know, how long has LeBron actually been the best player in basketball? And has it really been since like his 3rd year in the league?
Yeah.
Because that's a long time. That's a long time, and it's very quick to go from high school to dominating that fast right away. The only other person, and it's a sport that we have not mentioned yet, Serena Williams.
Yeah,
is the other person, because if you remember all of the stuff with Venus as well, and I always say when I talk to people about the Williams sisters, I feel bad for Venus Williams because she was great. She's a probably top 10 tennis player ever. But nobody ever talks about her because her sister is maybe the best ever, right? Yeah. And so you used to hear all of the stuff about the Williams sisters. You saw the dad Richard kind of bringing them through in an HBO special, and you know, from Compton and all of that. And I would say that seeing Serena and her career, which was great from day one, is another one in that same category.
Yeah, and it's been longevity too.
Oh yeah, whereas tennis, it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, it's usually like a 4-year span with tennis. And Venus, you know, when they first were coming up, Serena wasn't supposed to be as good as Venus.
Nope.
But then as soon as they started to see Serena kind of mature, and you saw the power and you saw the speed, she kind of quickly surpassed Venus. And Venus ran into some injuries, and then she has lupus and stuff. So that's hard to be a obviously world-class athlete. But if Serena didn't come along, Venus is no doubt top 10 of all time.
Oh yeah.
Now her sister is arguably, if not the best tennis player of all time. And I think Serena's kind of leapfrogged just women's tennis. You just talk about playing tennis and winning championships and being great for so long, you're talking about Roger Federer, you're talking about Serena Williams, and then you can mix in some other guys. I mean, other guys and gals. But I mean, when you're talking about a whole career, 22 majors or 20? She's going for 20. Well, she has 24 majors, trying to get 25. Seems to never get over the person that she should beat, right? She'll be 13-1 against them, and it'll be in like the championship of the U.S. Open, and then they'll beat her. But Serena Williams probably did live up to the hype, and I think that was all probably it was pre-social media, pre-type of media exposure. You know what I'm saying? That HBO special was big. But then like 5 years later, then things just blew up, and that's when Serena it was a match made in heaven. You
know who I actually just thought of, and I'm surprised we didn't mention this person, my last one, Tiger Woods.
Yes.
Tiger. It's funny too, because I feel like these people a lot of these folks are in the same kind of age range where it was right before social media blew up, which is why I give LeBron a different level of credit as well, because I think it's different going through it now. than it was even then, because Tiger Woods is somebody that you heard of. Like, even if you go watch the footage of that Masters where he kind of blew up and blew under the scene and lapped the field, if you watch that footage now, that kind of looks grainy to you.
Right, yeah.
If you watch that now. But I think Tiger was somebody that you heard about, had a ton of hype. He was going to be the next big thing in golf, and what he did for golf and kind of made it so inclusive and made everybody want to do it, man. I got out there with some red shirts and some Nike golf balls because of Tiger Woods too.
Sure.
So I definitely lived that. So I think Tiger is another one that's definitely on that short list.
I can't believe I didn't. Being a big golf fan, I didn't think of it. I think that Tiger's been on TV since he's been 4 years old, because he was on I think the Johnny Carson show a couple times, and so yeah, he's lived up to the hype, just because he obviously has 15 majors, trying to go get 18, but from the time that he stepped on, when he was a professional, when he said hello world, he has taken golf by storm. And I will say this, even though they have a lot of young guns right now, nobody moves the needle like Tiger. No matter what they do. And those guys know it. And you know what he's done? He's built up golf to where it's a major sport now, a legitimate sport. Kids are actually deciding to play golf because they can see they can play it long term, and actually if they're good enough, they can make a good living. But what he's done is he's not only lived up to the hype, he's brought everybody with him. When you think of a guy like Chris DeMarco decides that, I've made so much money being average that I can just go around and try to be on TV and be like a golf analyst now because of Tiger Woods. Phil Mickelson will tell you, and when you think about Venus Williams, compared to Serena, it's the same correlation between Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
If Tiger Woods didn't come along, Phil Mickelson probably has 6 more majors.
Oh yeah.
Then you
think of him just as a much bigger deal.
Yeah, bigger deal than he is now.
You wouldn't think that he lost those against Tiger the way that you now think about, which stains his legacy.
Sure, and there's probably a ton of players. Vijay Singh probably would have won a couple more.
Vijay Singh, Freddie Couples,
everybody would have won more if Tiger wasn't there. You got to think he at one clip he was winning 30% of the time he teed it up. So if he played 10 terms, he was winning 10.
Right.
I mean, he was winning 3. It's he's pretty impressive, and these guys and gals that we were talking about with Serena and all them, they have dominated for so long. I remember watching amazing. LeBron's first game when they played Sacramento.
Yeah, well, when he had that breakaway dunk, I can picture it.
I remember watching the high school dunk contest when it was all the LeBron hype, and he did a dunk, and my dad jumped up off the couch. But I'm going to tell you, here's a funny story. The first time I heard about LeBron, one of my best friends, Troy Evans, is from Cincinnati, Ohio. And when he played at Cincinnati, and we always talked about basketball. We'd play a little basketball in the off season, and we would just talk about local guys from when, where we were, growing up and stuff like that. I was telling them about the story of Sam Jacobson when they were saying that he was the, white Jordan and stuff like that, and from Minneapolis. But he's like, they're talking about this kid named LeBron James back home. And, Troy went to a big high school, and then, Cincinnati, football and basketball. And I'm like, there ain't no way. And he was like, hey, they're saying he's going to be better than Jordan. They're saying this and saying that. Next thing you know, within a year, then you start to see the games on ESPN and you see him play. And, man, it was like when you watch him play, he just is different. When I've watched him a couple of games, when he runs onto the floor, it's just a guy that's just different. Like when I always tell people, when Andre Johnson walked through the gates of practice, I know that dude's a Hall of Famer. I always say it was a magical night when his parents started, they procreated. It was just like all the stars lined up, man. It did, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's just with LeBron James, he's just different. And, people can argue about, whether he's first, second, third, or whatever. The main question I would ask somebody, give me an argument between him and anybody without talking about championships.
Yeah. And I think that is and it's just the other thing too. So I was talking to my coworker Derek Peterson about this 2 nights ago when the Lakers closed the series out, and I'm not even as interested anymore, and it'll happen at some point, about the debate, though, about him and where he ranks, if he's 1, if he's 2, if he's 3. But I think that at some point, too, and this gets caught up on social media a lot, people want to argue so much. I can't tweet out a picture of LeBron without somebody talking about Jordan, and it gets to be exhausting because I also want to just grab people and say, man, just appreciate what it is that we're seeing. This is not something that we're going to get to see a lot. If we think about all the excitement around the Jordan documentary, and it was great, right? Like, I hope that you realize that what you saw in that documentary, you're seeing that right now in real time in greatness. You are seeing greatness, and you should just appreciate it. And I hope that people understand that. And I get that he's, I guess, polarizing LeBron is, and you get all of this stuff, but I just hope that people appreciate it. But I also wanted to bring this to a local level because obviously in my day-to-day job, I cover recruiting for Nebraska, and I was thinking kind of recruits that I've seen that have lived up to the hype kind of immediately, and keeping it real recent. The first guy I thought of was Wan'Dale Robinson, who was a really big deal during the recruiting process, had offers from all over the country, could have went anywhere, came to Nebraska because of the vision that Scott Frost and his staff laid out for him about how they would utilize him, and he was very good last year. I think better than I think people realize, especially given the injuries that he had, over 1,000 total yards and a handful of touchdowns. Do you have a guy is there a guy that you played with here at Nebraska that you said, okay, I heard about this guy a lot, and he came in and he was good, or as good as he was supposed to be right away?
I have two. I would probably say number one would be a local guy up here in the Metro would be Ahman Green. Okay. Just because I think he was back then we had USA Today All-American. He was a whatever blue chip. You talked about his speed on the track, and obviously he was big, fast, and strong. And obviously he didn't come in to start because he was playing behind some great players. But when you saw him play, you knew that he was for real. The other guy would probably be Dominic Riola. Okay. From offensive line.
Hard to do it as a lineman too.
Hard to do it as a lineman, but he came in. He was as big as advertised. He was strong as advertised. He was nasty, and he could play multiple positions. And he fit right in, and he played as a true freshman. Obviously, he ended up leaving early after dominating for 3 years and winning awards and playing a long career in the NFL. So I would say those two just off the top of my head. Another one I would probably say is Grant Wistrom, because he was again a USA Today All-American, and he ended up making an impact at Nebraska from the very first time he stepped on the field. And you could tell that he had, obviously he was 6'5", and he had the frame. He was 230. And they obviously ended up leaving it obviously a lot bigger and stronger. But you could see everything that was written about him was true. And then every year he continued to get better. And so I would say those three from the time that I played, just off the top of my head, they matched up. Everything matched up with them on the field and off the field, and obviously at the next level as well.
Yeah, it's always interesting to kind of see that because, there are so many stories. We always talk about the other way, right? The guys that you heard about, and they came in and it's like, I don't know about this one, or you knew from jump. So it's always also nice to be able to then talk about the guys that actually it went well from them as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting just because, as much as I think about Ahman Green, or we think about recruiting and you hear about these guys, it's always, I wish you could just go back and look at every article and then look at their production or how long they stayed around Nebraska. I'm thinking about guys that have came in this year, whether it's, and I always equate it to JUCO guys, because I always say they're, flip of a coin, because it's so much different going from high school to JUCO to come to college, where it's very, very structured and you have to deal with a ton of pressure, not only on the field, but then academically. I say it's a harder transition coming from JUCO than coming from high school. I just believe that, because I think in high school, those players are probably coming from a structured environment. They've already kind of hit they dotted their I's and crossed their T's as far as academics and stuff like that most of the time. But when you go to JUCO, it's kind of you're a free for all, and you just never know if you get a JUCO that really cares about their players to get them to the next level. I think those guys generally make it. But then also sometimes you could be in a JUCO division or around a JUCO team that isn't very good or playing against very good competition, and then that step up generally isn't. It never matches up with the tape that you see when it's tweeted out, like their huddle tape, versus what you see them playing and also you're going up and playing against a Power 5 conference players and coaches. It's a hard transition, but the hype train I think has gotten a lot, I would say worse, but just a lot more powerful. It can make or break guys, and the hardest thing I think for these guys is not to believe it.
Right. So just keep your head down.
Keep your head down and keep
go
going,
to work.
Go to work.
You just have to go to work, because I always think of it this way, like, and it's weird because I have an interesting role in this. But you almost have to ignore all of the good stuff that people are saying about you and how great that you can be. You have to ignore the bad stuff too, and just remember that you have to continue getting better to keep having those things said about you, right?
Sure.
Because it's going to go away. I don't care how nice they treated you during the process. Like, that stuff will go away quickly if it goes sideways for you once you get to college.
Well, they're always trying to recruit. Within 2 years, they're going to recruit somebody to take your position.
Right.
And so don't think that you're cemented there because of what you did in high school. That was like pregame. Now the game starts. Now you got to improve every year. You got to try to reinvent yourself almost every year. You got to continue to work hard and be accountable every year. And I think one of the biggest things that's hurt Nebraska, and this is prior to Scott Frost, is the development of players that have came in with, whether it's 3 stars or 4 stars or 5 stars or even 2 stars, from the biggest downfall, or one of the biggest downfalls, is when you see them as a freshman and they kind of hit the scene and they're their new kind of car. They look the same, and they haven't improved when they leave the program. You don't see the physical gains from them. You don't see the performance gains from them. And I'm talking about prior to Scott Frost and those guys. And so hopefully that's one of the things that they're focusing on, is taking these kids from, the beginning to the end, and you see a lot of better product by the time they leave.
Let's break that down.
All right, now every week we were going to end the show with a segment to talk about the beginning there. We're going to have a couple of segments that are mainstays. Our final segment will be a mainstay, and it'll be called Put Them on Blast. It's exactly what it sounds like, right? When we basically put somebody on blast for something they did or they said. My first one, my inaugural Put Them on Blast, it's something, man. Deion Sanders, the new head coach at Jackson State. Now, full disclosure, I have a little bit of a tie to Jackson State, a lot of it. My dad went to Jackson State as an undergrad before he got his law degree from DePaul in Chicago. And so, Pop, I know you're kind of nervous right now that I'm calling out the team, because, boy, he is excited.
Oh, everybody is.
Get out about Deion Sanders being down there as the coach. And I think for good reason. You should be excited. Jackson State, the Tigers have not gotten this much attention in a long time for football, right? You usually talk about that Sonic Boom, the band, which came out for his introductory thing when Deion came in. But the problem that I have right now, and I just want to give a warning, it's not even a full putting him on blast, but I just want it out there in the world. What do you know about Deion Sanders? You know 2 things. You know, 1, he was one of the greatest cornerbacks to ever play, and 2, Deion loves him some Deion. It is about him. And so what I'm just hoping that ends up happening here is that Deion Sanders ends up actually caring about this job and developing young men, and whether or not they win games there, and hopefully they end up getting these 4 and 5 stars that their fans want to get. And I know he offered a bunch of them coming in, and it was kind of cool to see the guys that I've talked to in my job about Nebraska, like tweeting out, "Hey, I got an offer from Jackson State, like Prime Time, Coach Prime," all this stuff. That stuff was legitimately cool. I was happy to see that. But I just hope that once kind of the flash and the substance wears off, and kind of all of the eyeballs and the spotlight from this initial surge wears off, that the work is really being done and that he really is about this job and pours himself into it. We'll see. I'm skeptical, but I hope it works out.
I think everybody's going to be a little skeptical just because of Deion's built himself a huge brand after football. He, as great as he was as a player, which is probably the best shutdown corner of all time, he's one of the best NFL and college analysts of all time, or right now. He does the stuff at the combine. It's almost like, what are you going to do with all the stuff that you've built up to be at the highest level, like you did your playing skills, right? Mm-hmm. Now you're taking on a job to being a head coach, and there's a lot of time. It takes a commitment. You got to sacrifice a lot of things. The only thing that makes me feel like he can do it is he spoke about it at the Super Bowl last year. He said it, and everybody thought he was joking. But he's also coached a pretty powerful high school in Texas for years, and he sent a lot of kids to college. Look, he coached Maurice Washington that was here, so he sent a lot of kids to the next level. He's been through the process recently with all 3 of his sons. Deion Sanders Jr., the one that's at South Carolina, and the son now that I think that's going to Florida Atlantic. So he's been through it. So I think he knows what he's getting into. The biggest thing for him that I'd like to see, I know he's going to coach and mentor those kids and make them better people. If he's there 1, 2, 3 years, 4 years, I think is max. What I would like to see for him is have a coach that he's developing to take over Jackson State. And I'm not talking about Warren Sapp either.
No,
and I'm not talking about
Sapp said he was fishing. He said he wasn't coaching.
Yeah, I'm not talking about him or Terrell Owens. I'm talking about Deion Sanders bringing somebody in that he believes in, whether it's somebody he has a prior relationship with or somebody that comes in and earns their stripes to take over Jackson State and continue this hype and the good vibes and hopefully the good play and the notoriety that he's bringing to the whole HBCU, because the one thing that people don't understand is Deion Sanders had set up a combine strictly for HBCU student athletes to get into the NFL, but then COVID hit. So he has actually shown that he's kind of been invested before this happened. I don't know if it's part of the deal. I don't know if the NFL sometimes is somehow involved with the whole, the dynamics of the world right now, but I'm hoping that Deion Sanders comes in it with the right mindset and with the pure idea of doing, Jackson State and the whole HBCU the right thing, because I think if he does, it's going to cement him as one of the best people of all time. It
would be a legitimately great story. And there are like kind of seeds and thoughts that this could go well. Like the stuff that you laid out is great. Like that is true. Like, and it could be another thing that is very good and positive that he does. But boy, you can see that other side coming. And so that it just makes me nervous.
Well, I think that Deion Sanders is somebody, when you got to look at him from his personality standpoint, he's very unique though. If you ever got a chance to like sit down and talk to him, he's never drank, he's never done drugs, but he has that type of personality, and he's not as cocky or arrogant as you think he is when you talk to him off camera. He literally turns it on. Like if he walked in here, it's Deion time. I mean, it's prime time. But what I think that the only thing that worries me is getting used to maybe not the success that he's used to and everything that he's done. He's in commercials. He's built up his, he's left the NFL Network. He's in the bar stools. And those commitments that he has, I'm assuming in his contract, there's a lot of leeway. Because he has that big, huge house and compound that he's building in Texas. He always is, he's always tweeting out about fishing and stuff like that. So, you build and put your money into that house. You're not trying to be in Jackson, Mississippi, down there when it's hot in facilities that are probably not as nice as your house, right?
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah.
So that's where that's my only pause. But if he can do that and be committed, and I also think the time constraints as far as say Nebraska and their recruiting is not as strenuous as it is probably or will be down in Jackson. They don't have the budget for it, right? So I don't think that will be. I think that will be playing well for him. So I think as long as he tries to do the job and do it the right way and set Jackson State up in a better place after he's gone than where it is now, I think it'll be just another feather in his cap of something that is successful. But it could go the wrong way if he has. Now, if he had Warren Sapp really as his coach, I was like, this ain't going to work out.
Let's just not do that. Yeah,
don't bring Ray Lewis, Warren Sapp, none of them clowns around. Get some true coaches. And those guys can come visit, right?
Yeah, they can come.
We don't need those aren't the guys that you want. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Those are the guys those aren't the guys, and this is nothing against them, but those guys aren't the guys that you want to build on your staff, because you've seen that kind of go tank. So I think Deion will do well. I'm hoping he does well. But I agree with you. I could see him going the other way.
Now you got to put somebody on blast.
I got two. So who I'm going to put on blast?
Double dipping. I didn't know we could double dip.
Well, they're a tag team.
Oh, okay.
See, because as much as we talked about LeBron, this is when you're great. You got guys in free agency tag teaming and trying to diss you and trying to beat you. Okay. So I'm putting Kawhi Leonard in soft quotations, playoff Paul George on blast.
Pandemic P.
And I get it. Look, I'm not making fun of any type of things, the depression that he had going on. I feel I've dealt with my own. I'm not that. I'm talking about what you did and what you said prior to all this. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I'm putting them on blast is because when they came together, Kawhi Leonard turned his nose up at LeBron James and being the next great Laker.
Yep.
Right? Then he went to the crosstown rival and went in there and said, you need to get rid of all these picks and you need to get me Paul George. That's who I want. And we're going to beat LeBron and we're going to win a championship this year. Then he comes out with the commercial saying
his city.
It's his city. Yep. And the crown, the king's crown is on his mirror. And he was the man, right? The claw and all this stuff, right? And just like I think Stephen A. said, look, he was like Cyborg. He was supposed to be cold-blooded, right? Well, then you get in the playoffs and then you come up against the Nuggets, right? And you had your load management. You're supposed to be fresh. We need the gel. Everything's set up for you to overtake the Lakers. You kind of split with them during the season. And you have your little, I call him the little dog Spike, Pat Beverly, hyping you guys up. It's championships. You're thinking about 2, 3, 4 championships before your contracts run out. And then you come up against the Denver Nuggets in Game 7 and have 14 points.
They had less combined points, rebounds, and assists in their Game 7 against Denver than LeBron had in the game the other night to close the
exactly. And you two were roundabout ways, always throwing shots at the Lakers, always saying that you guys are taking over. It was Clip City, Chip City, and then
all of that stuff where it was like, what was it, heart over hype,
heart over hype, and all that stuff. All year you were talking junk, and then you get out there with your press conference after you guys then crap the bed, and Paul George says, "Well, this was not ever about winning a championship this year. This is a long-term process." Hold on, player, you only got 2 more years.
Yeah, because they have the thing that people forgot is that they only signed 2 + 1.
2 + 1. So you actually only have 1 more year with the player option.
Yep.
And you guys both did it because you guys thought you guys were going to win 2 championships in a row and then go off and cash out. Now you lost. Now it's like, oh, we're trying to build chemistry. Well, what have you been doing for 82 games? And what were you doing during training camp? Not the first one, but the second one.
Yeah, that's the thing that always troubled me about that team is we got to this end point where, and all of a sudden they didn't have chemistry, and the excuse was they were thrown together, whereas and it's always in comparison to the Lakers because that's what this whole thing was about.
Sure.
The Lakers were even more thrown together than this. Like they brought in Markieff Morris at the end of the year, and he looks to be as more of a part of that unit and team than anybody is cohesively to the Clippers. Yeah,
they
it's just
picked
a
up
weird
J.R.
thing.
Smith, and then Bradley, right? Avery Bradley, he opted out, and he was a big part of their part of their whole defense, and he was an extending player in their program, and he hadn't been around. So then you had to wait for Rondo to come. You can go through training camp, and he comes out good. Then he breaks his hand or has his hand, and he comes back.
Then had the back spasm.
Then had to come back. And had to come back again. So if anybody was thrown together, it was the Lakers. Because you got to think, once they got AD, I remember I was watching the sports show, and they only really had like 6 players on the contract.
Right.
And then they started picking up JaVale McGee. Then they picked up Dwight Howard. Then they picked up a couple other guys. Then now they got a roster. But at the end of the day, if you look through 1 through 12, the Clippers roster, everybody's good. They even picked up my man from Detroit that was the starting point guard. They traded for him.
Reggie Jackson.
They even had him coming off the bench. I mean,
it just didn't. But I think the problem,
Lemon Pepper Lou,
which we could do an hour on Lemon Pepper Lou. We will not, but we could do a whole hour on that. But I think part of the problem too was that Lou Williams, Lemon Pepper Lou is a good example of this. Is they had a lot of guys. Montrezl Harrell is another one of these guys where they're like plus bench guys. So what I mean is like they're not like traditional bench guys or others, as Shaq likes to call them, right? Where they actually feel like they're kind of stars in their own right. And so I think part of that friction though is they're okay with Kawhi Leonard being treated differently because it's Kawhi Leonard, even though side note, he is not the best player in the world right now. It's still LeBron James. But y'all were hyping him up as that. The people that kept coming to my mentions telling me that mess. So they're okay with Kawhi being treated like that. We're not going to treat, quote, playoff P so differently. If I'm Lemon Pepper Lou, I'm looking at him sideways like, hey, I can get these points that you supposedly out here getting and not getting. So I understand they would have some different chemistry issues. I think there's some jealousy and some hatred and a little haterade going on that team too.
Yeah, and plus then I knew they were desperate. This is when I knew the Clippers weren't going to win a championship. You want to know? I knew they weren't going to win a championship when they had to go to playing dirty against the Mavericks.
Against Dallas, against Luka.
Against Luka. Because if Porzingis doesn't get hurt, not that the Clippers lose that series, that goes 6 or 7 games. Yep. But it let me know about their team chemistry and the level of desperations that they were in. So I don't know if all off season or during COVID that they thought it was just a layup and they never really took this Lakers seriously. But I do think that was the first chink in the armor. Then when I saw them try to talk their way to being tough, and in sports and professional sports, it's either you're tough or you're not. And in the teams, most teams that try to talk like they're tough, most of them don't play that way. And they didn't scare anybody. The Nuggets weren't scared.
No.
And
they got some dogs on that team too.
And they just play. And really what happened, remember, I mean, the whole series changed when the quietest guy in the NBA, Paul Millsap, jumped up and got it going. So then that let everybody know you done went way too far. Right. Then once you went that too far, they said, you know what, we're going for it. We're going for the dagger in the heart. Yep. And they just came back from 3-1 and overwhelmed them. And then you hear the excuses. You haven't heard from Pat Beverly, right?
Yeah, it's weird. He's not talking no more.
Right. He was in the casino and they were in the strip clubs with, Lemon Pepper Lou, which is also another chink in the armor. Anybody that leaves the bubble and ends up, I don't care how you got there. Yeah. I've been to funerals where we done partied to the wee hours of the night, right? A celebration. But not once have I ended up in a strip club eating lemon pepper wings.
No.
And I'm not going to end up in a strip club after I leave a bubble, which is very restricted, and I have a championship literally in their grasp, right? It's something that they've never done before, and then you're going to leave all your teammates there, and I'm going to go have a night at the strip club. That just let me know that those guys just thought you could get 12 individual players and do what you want, and then we were just that good. We were going to figure it out. Now that worked during the season, where
when you're in a back-to-back against Charlotte,
and that worked. But that's what people don't understand when they kind of looked at the records. It's just that the NBA is different. When these guys want to really turn it on, they can turn it on. But the great teams play good all year. When you think of the Warriors, you think about the Miami Heat when they were winning. You think about Cleveland when they won that championship, or even when they lost in the championship. They weren't doing some of the things that the Clippers were doing. They didn't have those type of personalities. I hate it for Doc Rivers, but it's what he signed up for. But I'm putting those two on blast, and if they might win it next year, and I'm pretty sure they're open. They're probably trying to rub their little rabbit's foot to all as much as they can to hope that the Lakers lose. But at the end of the day, they lost to the Nuggets, and they are the first place losers, and they're a bunch of chumps.
I like it. That is a great place to leave it. I am very happy. I'll be smiling the rest of the day. That'll do it for the very first episode of the Straight Up Breakdown podcast. Subscribe to the podcast everywhere you can get podcasts. Rate us and leave us a 5-star review. If you leave us a 4-star, I'm inclined to think you're a hater and you don't want that. We'll catch you next time.